Good morning. Thank you all for joining us today. We're going to give it about a minute to allow the room to populate here, see if we've got any more takers for our session today.
This is Melissa with Agnos. You want to give her a call back?
Please remember to keep yourself on mute. Okay, great. I am going to get started here. Thank you all for being here today. Happy International Compost Awareness Week. I hope you'll be sharing information about the value of compost to your networks. My name is Karen O'Brien. I am the Executive Director of the Michigan Recycling Coalition, and welcome to our very different annual conference. As you know, we're having to do things a little bit differently. We hope the way we've managed these events has been helpful to you. We encourage your feedback about, sessions, ideas, topics, and ways we could do things better. So please share those if you have any feedback for us. Before we get started, I've got a few things to share that we've been sharing over the course of this conference. Eagle's RFP for the 2021 Recycling Grant Program is out. You can find that on their website under recycling and under grants. MRC members should have received their ballot for the Board of Directors April 16th or April 20th. So please fill out that ballot, and the election results will be shared at the annual member meeting on May 12th. We hope you can join us for that meeting. And the Part 115 package passed through the House of Representatives a couple of weeks ago. It has been referred to the Senate Regulatory Reform Committee. We need your support on this package. It's an important package for the state of Michigan and for our industry specifically, and we've got a lot of different ways you can support. So please take a look at your MRC newsletter for how you can help, or the MRC website as to how you can help. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, or I may be reaching out to you to get your help. So we've already hosted 8 conference sessions, and recordings for all of those sessions are available on our website. On that same conference page. Those recordings are really open and available for anyone to view. If you like this session and you want to see what we did with other sessions, I think we put together some high quality in-depth sessions for you. We also intended these sessions to help to bring new people to the table, help to educate local decision makers and others that need to know about what's happening in the world of recycling in Michigan right now. So we will have 3 more sessions coming up next week. 2 of them are keynote presentations, so those will be guaranteed good sessions. Plus, there's an MRC annual meeting and report and an Eagle update. So I hope you'll join us for the sessions that are next week. Before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors. Without our sponsors, we would be dead in the water. These have been really very loyal sponsors to the Michigan Recycling Coalition and our mission over many years, many of them. So thank you for the support that we get from these sponsors. We appreciate everything you do for us. Now moving into the logistics of today. Please keep yourself on mute. Our people may mute you if we hear some background noise, so be aware of that. Please submit your questions through chat throughout the course of the presentation, and we'll pick those up at the end. The webinar is being recorded. If you have technical issues or need any help, you can have a direct chat with Help Desk Terry Ratterink. She's on staff and can help you with anything you need. And I'll remind you, Kelly Shelter is highlighting the speaker for you today, but you are ultimately in control of your view. Up in the right-hand corner of your Zoom screen, you can choose your view if you'd like to see kind of the presentation or the speaker. You can show this view. If you'd like to see the gallery, you can use the toggle slide to show your screen larger or smaller, depending on people that you want to see. So you are in control of that. Without further ado, we'll talk about the cost of logistics and the ins and outs of trucking. I think in this industry, the movement of material costs money. Pickup costs money, transfer costs money, and it's really important to understand those logistics to get the most bang for your buck out of your recycling program. So we've got several people here today to help you understand, what you need to consider. Carrie Bliss is the Customer Experience and Sustainability Lead for PADNUS. Justin Youngman is a Commercial Account Executive at PADNUS. They'll lead off our panel today. Steve Kent is a Midwest Business Developer for Pratt Industries. He'll be talking about the transfer of materials from a manufacturer perspective. Jill Brown is the Account Consultant for or Executive for Metro Recycling Systems, a broker and a broker perspective. And Tim Botso is the Parks and Sanitation Manager for the City of Bay City, and he's going to talk about it from a government perspective. Without further ado, I will introduce Carrie Bliss. Did I miss a slide here? No. I will introduce Carrie Bliss and ask her to take the mic.
Thank you so much, Karen. We are super excited to participate in this. So thank you for inviting us. A lot of the people, it looks like, that are on this call today know a little bit about PADNUS, so I'll be brief on this part of it. We were founded in 1905. We are a privately held, locally owned business in the West Michigan area with locations all over the state and into Indiana. We recycle paper, plastics, metal, and electronics. And to give you a little bit of a feel for the scope, last year we recycled just shy of 3 billion pounds of material. Next. This is a picture of the family. I always love to show this because they are truly some of the best people I've ever known in my life. Right there in the middle of the back row is Jonathan Padnos, the young gentleman in the leather jacket. He is our current president and has just done an amazing job of helping us accelerate technology and doing things a little bit more futuristic in the scrap industry. It's just been a treat to work with him. You'll also see the third generation of Padnuses and the second generation to the far left of your screen. That's Seymour Padnos. He recently passed away on his 99th, right before his 100th birthday. So he was 99 years old. Amazing man. Still came to work every day, asked great questions. We miss him terribly, but his contribution to the industry was pretty incredible. And then over on the far right, you've got Josh and Sam. Yes, it's not your eyes playing tricks on you. They are identical twins. Josh leads our paper division and Sam leads electronics. So mostly the non-ferrous materials from electronics. Next.
Carrie, I'll just interrupt and see if we can get Tim Botso's attention. Tim, it's difficult for us to mute you because you are a co-host. Can you mute, please? We've asked him to mute. So if anybody has Tim on their cell phone and can send him a text to let him know, that would be helpful. Thanks. Sorry about that, Carrie. Go ahead.
Next slide. So what is it that we do? Next slide.
The newer electronics.
Just, yeah. We make things more valuable by leveraging our diverse processing equipment with lots of capacity. So there certainly are larger companies than Padnus, but what we're really proud of is the wide array of equipment and different technologies that we use. So to the best of our knowledge, there isn't anyone that does more diverse things than we do. We're not just aggregators of material. We actually process, compound, and have many circular and closed loop programs. Next. This is just a brief picture, certainly not all of the things that we do, but some of the materials that we handle, making pellets and plastic, obviously paper bales going to mills. Yeah, we make briquettes out of turnings, just about anything to do with metal, papers, and plastics and electronics we're involved in. And this is where Justin was going to come in and speak, but I'm not quite sure what happened to him. So I will do my best to cover the logistics side. Next slide. All right, so our fleet, what I do know is that we have 75 drivers on the road, which is a challenge right now. Most people realize that drivers are a shortage. So we treat our drivers exceptionally well. One of the things that they enjoy is that they can be home every night. So a lot of times when we have van trailer drivers in our country, they're gone for many days at a time. So sometimes we're able to attract drivers that other industries are not. Although on the flip side, our drivers are asked to do a lot more than the typical driver. So we're asking them to take a brief look at the load and understand what they're hauling, so we make sure that it gets to the best possible destination. So they have to be pretty well-rounded in order to be an active participant in our process. Next. I'm not sure if the video will work. I thought I would show briefly what it looks like to load a trailer. So Karen, why don't you see if it'll work? Sometimes these links are good and sometimes they don't.
Let's see.
You would click in the middle if it's going to work. If not, we'll just go to the next slide. Not so much, huh?
It doesn't appear to be working. Sorry.
That's perfectly okay. If anyone is interested in seeing this, feel free to send me a text or a chat or an email. I'll be happy to forward you the link. It's on Vimeo. So if you were to search Padnos van trailer loading, you would also come across it. This is a picture of some of our custom equipment. We have a full team of engineers and welders, skilled trades. So this is really a small sampling of the types of things that we do. It's very customized based on what the customer needs. We're happy to send our engineers out to your site and help them figure out what type of equipment is going to help them convey their material, whether that's inside of their plant or eventually getting into a container outside of the plant, making sure that they stay obviously in compliance with Eagle and any other types of challenges that they may face. Next slide. These are books. Obviously, we recycle those. Next. And these are different bales, different grades of paper, obviously corrugated. There really isn't a grade of paper that we don't handle. Most of it is in bales, and I'm sure I'm going to let Jill and Steve Kent talk a little bit more about that because they are the experts in that compared to myself. And we'll go to the next slide. Pallets. Next. So what happens when material arrives at our yards and plants? Next slide. We have a lot of equipment. So the metal by far is the largest portion of our business. And this is a picture of a shredder. And the inside is the picture on the right. Those drums break up the material. So we can take anything from a washer dryer, bicycle, sort of home materials, to cars, to large production machines. Some of those are have to be torched before that they're shredded, but this is the piece of equipment where it all begins. Next. This is our shear. So some pieces of metal are too large to fit into the throat of the shredder, so we will shear them into smaller pieces. Next. And some of the sortation does need to be done manually. It's not the easiest job in the world, but it is a great way to learn the material. So often we will send our people here when they first come on board. It's also a place we send our account executives. I think it's important that our account executive get hands-on experience before we send them out in the field. Next. Baling metal. Aluminum is probably the largest commodity on the metal side that we bale today, but we also brick, copper, and some of the different grades in non-ferrous. Next slide.
It appears, Carrie, that Justin has joined us.
Hey, Justin, you want to take over since you're better at this? All right, go for it.
Technical problems there. So I think Carrie's talking about really kind of, how do we bring material into our facilities, right? And when we do, where do we go from there? So, one of the things we bring in is wire, right? So it comes into us either loose or baled, either in Gaylords or baled. And then what do we do with that? Well, we run it through what we call a wire chop. So essentially it extracts the insulated coating on the outside. So we recovered the copper, which you can see here in this picture. What else do we do? What else do we do with metals that we bring in? Well, one thing we do is we sort them electromagnetically, or we use an eddy current. So that's a picture you'll see here at one of our facilities. A lot of this comes from our shredder. So this is stuff after it's shredded. We'll run through this electromagnetic machine, which will separate ferrous materials from non-ferrous materials. Then, of course, paper. So what we bale paper, right? So Paper comes into us two ways. It either comes into us baled and we cross dock it, or it comes into us loose, whether it be a compactor dumping at one of our facilities or in Gaylord boxes or on pallets. We then run that up a conveyor, which you see there, and it goes through our horizontal baler. And you can see some bales stacked up there on that bottom right picture, which then get loaded to the paper mill. We also shred plastics. So you can see here, this is what we call HDPE dunnage. Some of this we do what we call pre-work to. So we'll remove some of the attachments or metal. Once that's done, it then goes up another conveyor belt to a shredder, where we then create what's called regrind. And then we also produce our own line of plastic resin, which is also called repro. So it's reprocessed plastic. And that goes to our, basically the regrind we generated our Grand Rapids plant goes to our Fremont, Indiana plant, where we then create our own brand of resin, which can be sold back into any number of manufacturing sectors. We also bulk load plastic pellets out of our facility. So you'll see there's a tanker truck and you'll see some silos there where we'll hold the plastic resin where that then gets loaded into those tanker trucks and goes to the manufacturer. We also load barges. So one of our largest metal yards is connected to a lake that is connected to Lake Michigan. So we'll get barges where we load those from our metal yard. Also by rail. So I think the only thing we don't do is air, right? So road, rail, and sea. And here's a picture of a rail car at one of our facilities. We've loaded fiber, we've loaded plastic, we've loaded metal. Most of our larger facilities have what we call rail spurs, right? Where the rail yard will drop a car. We have a day or two to load it, and then they come back and pick it up. And usually you can get about 3 to 1. So about every rail car is about 3 loads by van trailer. So all these work great if the load is heavy. So what happens if, we're bringing in light materials?
All right, so this is where I'm going to really take over. And I have a lot more expertise here, so I'm glad that Justin was able to join us. So our customers have had many challenges, and it's often around these lightweight packaging materials, not the corrugated or sorted office paper. Those are fairly easy to convey. But what do we do about smaller volumes of film, of plastic banding? So we decided to create a space. You can go to the next slide. And sustainable solutions, next slide, called Sustainability City. So this is an 18,000 square foot innovation space. It really gives us the ability to slow down and dive into our customers' loads. So where a typical load may take us 45 minutes to process, loads in Sustainability City can take up to 6-8 hours. We will go through and sort material if it's been mixed. We run weight trials on using different size balers, densify styrofoam, or I shouldn't say styrofoam, EPS, expanded polystyrene. We can shop banding. We do regrinds in here, lots of testing. And the best part that our customers enjoy is that they can come and bring their teams and we can do problem solving together that's based specifically on their culture and what their needs are. And we have found that to be the most successful way to get cultural changes on the plant floor. Next slide. So how do we really make that happen? Definitely with these complex issues and all of the rage with sustainability and carbon footprint, in order to solve the problems, we've got to remove those silos. So sometimes, green initiatives start from the bottom, sometimes they start in the middle, sometimes they start from the top. It is important, though, that all of these different departments are talking to each other. We have limited success if we're only talking to one level at a company because there's always competing objectives. Next slide. These are some of the ratios and reduction when you chop material versus having it loose in a Gaylord. So chopping banding has quite an advantage. When I say it's a 40-to-1 ratio, literally that's how much less freight there is. We can only fit 52 Gaylords on a 53-foot van trailer. So when you can reduce the volume of something and make it a much heavier load and get 1,000, 1,200 pounds in a Gaylord, that has a significant savings for the customer and for the planet in terms of its carbon footprint. Next slide. And I'll just go through these fairly quickly. This is the ratio for EPS. Next. And these are trays. Plastic trays come in a variety of different materials, which I'd be happy to share with you further. But in general, there's a pretty significant advantage to grinding those trays. Next. Corrugated is 8:1. And now it can vary a little bit. I sometimes use a 10:1 ratio. It depends on the customer and how good they are about doing their boxes, if they're flattened already, not flattened, what size the boxes are. Next. Film 22:1. So this is a big one. That loose film, even if it's in a small quantity, can definitely be a challenge for our customers. Next. This shows you a visual of how that film reduction can make a difference. So if you were to have 52 Gaylords in a van trailer, approximately 35 pounds of film each, you're only going to get 2 bales into that, the equivalent of 2 bales into that van trailer, 1,820 pounds. So if it's baled, we can get 40,000 pounds into the van trailer. Huge difference. Next. So then we found that the customers still have a lot of mixed materials and they're not trained in how to identify those materials. So we built a partnership with Goodwill that we're very proud of, and they formed a program called Ignite, which is training 18 to 24-year-olds that have barriers to work in the recycling industry. These individuals are trained on how to be able to sort the trays, how to identify the different types of plastics, and then they are able to grind the plastics. We just went through our first couple of loads of trays and they did a beautiful job. We tested the material at every step of the way and it was flawless. They made 0 errors. And now it's a material that not only have they trained people on how to be able to do that work, when those participants graduate from the program, they're available to be hired either by recycling companies or by manufacturers who may need that sort of technical skill and aptitude on their plant floor. So it definitely is making a difference in Michigan in terms of our recycling rate. Next. And that was it for today. I think we used up all of our time. So I am going to pass it over to Steve Kent.
Hey, Gary, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay, everybody? Terrific. So my name's Steve Kent. I'm with Pratt Recycling. I'm Midwest developer for our group as well as the Northeast. I buy and procure material for about 3 paper mills. Pratt is the 5th largest corrugated box making company in North America. You can hit the next slide, Karen. So, you know, as a end buyer, end consumer, a little bit about Pratt. When Pratt is really a corrugated box making company, when we make boxes, it's made out of 100% recycled paper, truly made out of scrap corrugated, scrap mixed paper, and a little secret sauce to get the boxes to stick together. So that's really our bread and butter. Pratt also offers full-blown sustainability programs where we're looking to procure material not only from recycling facilities, but any type of generator that may be generating scrap out in the field. So, you know, a lot of times what the conversation comes into play is the cost to serve or the cost for freight. So let me just tell you a little bit about Pratt and its commitment to sustainability and to the logistics side. So we're a for-hire carrier. We're also a freight broker as well. Pratt has about 550 power units in its fleet. It has about 4,500 ultra lightweight trailers that we also have in our fleet. We have a Pratt tracking app that can monitor our drivers and our equipment to see where our equipment is at. And we also have a scheduling tool that keeps us efficient. Our goal is to deliver corrugated boxes as much as possible and to pick up recycling on the back end. We call it a closed loop model for us. We're looking to procure scrap back to the paper mills. Next slide, please. So I mentioned Pratt has a significant investment. We are one of the top 10 largest privately held trucking fleet in North America. So we've made a significant investment into ultra lightweight trailers, which allows us to typically a truckload of materials about 20 tons, but with the ultra lightweight trailers that Pratt invested in, we're up to 23 tons per load. So you can imagine if you had 1,000 trucks coming across the scale or 500 trucks coming across the scale, that extra 3 tons really adds up. We have carrier quick pay options. We have expanded lead times. We also provide drop trailer management for our facilities as well, which in the long term reduces loading and unloading detention times. I heard about the driver experience. It's very difficult to find drivers today. Pratt's got a very good incentive program we do have some overnight driving capabilities, but most of our loads the drivers are back the same night. Next slide, please. Some of the challenges we're looking at, I think everybody's aware of this. It's driver shortage. You just can't find drivers today. It's not like it was a few, 10, 15 years ago where drivers were abundant. Today, there's a significant shortage of drivers. It's very challenging. Pratt offers, like I mentioned, a lot of capability to bring drivers on, flexibility. Truck capacity and supply is another challenge that we're looking at as well. Load cost. I heard an interesting statistic yesterday that it roughly costs $1 a minute to operate a truck or a tractor trailer. That's about $60 an hour. I think that's a little light. I think it's closer to $80 or $90 an hour. You could have maybe a $60 an hour van service going or a straight truck moving. But if you get into flatbed service or any type of heavy duty rigging trucks, it could be as high as $125 an hour. So, as a sales rep or a developer, the first thing that we look at when we go into service a customer is the cost to get that material picked up and either delivered to a recycling plant or to the paper mill. And at the end of the day, and I'll reflect on Carrie and Justin's point, it's about balers and densification equipment because tonnage is the name of the game when it comes to hauling scrap. Without tonnage, that's where your cost per ton starts getting taken apart. Full truckload quantities, full-size van loads, that's what helps keep that cost of freight down. We don't see freight getting less expensive in the near future. Diesel fuel continues goes up. Raw supplies are challenges for us. To chime in on that, a lot of regulations are occurring right now. Drivers have limited hours that they can run. So those are things we have to keep an eye on. On this cargo specific to recycled paper, as a end user for scrap material, we're always looking to backhaul commodities, and typically, unfortunately, recycled paper, if we can't bring it in our own transportation fleet, it gets brokered off in another division. We also have intermodal and rail capability at some of our paper mills as well. Next slide, please. Wow, mine was short and sweet. I'm going to pass it off to Jill Brown, and I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Jill Brown. I'm with Metro Recycling Solutions, and today we're going to take a comprehensive look at freight and some of the decisions behind when to ship your material.
Jill, somehow you got muted, so we didn't hear you when you started talking during this slide.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So Metro Recycling Solutions, we are a recycling broker that operates in the Midwest and throughout the country, primarily in Michigan and the Midwest. Some of the benefits with working with Metro would be we only get paid if we successfully move your material. So not only are we working hard to keep your bulk items moving like corrugated and sorted office paper, but also we really do our due diligence to find markets for some harder, more specific material. We offer ongoing education. So as your materials may change by what you're generating or specifications at the receiving location may change, we help you navigate through those changes. We offer customized plans. We really listen to what your priorities are, and then we build a plan that makes sense around your business. We offer fair and competitive rebates, and we have flexible payment options. We prepay for loads often. A lot of times we're able to send a rebate check within 10 days of the material shipping. So why are we talking about freight today? Why are we taking such a deep dive into how to move these materials? Simply, freight and freight lanes really directly affect the accessibility for Michiganders to recycle. The freight cost affects not only the commodity pricing, but basically every industry's bottom line. So literally the freight and moving material is the backbone of recycling. Some of the topics we're going to be talking about today is the decisions that go into preparing the load and if you know if your material is ready to ship. We'll talk about the receiving locations, how to utilize a full trailer. We'll talk about shipping forms, chargebacks, potential chargebacks, and how to avoid them, and some terminology that affect freight cost. So determining customers' priorities. First, we want to look at not only the program itself and the goals behind your recycling program, but also for the specific load. Why are you shipping this material now? Is it because of the commodity pricing is there? If you're doing inventory, you need to get the material out, you're lacking the floor space, or if you're just moving the material as it flows through your facility. So these are the things we need to consider when we're building a load or a potential load to be shipped. We want to, again, look at those priorities. That's the bedrock of every decision. We look at the commodities that you have on hand, whether it be post-consumer or industrial. And then we look at the volumes. How much of what do you have? And that really determines not only if you're going to be shipping the material, but how the material is processed. So if you don't have a large volume of material, you may not have a forklift on hand. You may not have a baler. So your volumes really dictate how the material flows through your facility and if you're able to ship it. And then where the material is going. If you're going to a partnering MRF or to a end user or direct to market. So preparing the material to ship, you need to create shippable units of material. Most commonly, we're going to be creating bales of material or shipping material in gaylords. So now after you've prepared your material in shippable units, you're going to estimate your value per load. And this is important to do because you want to make sure that you have the most information available to you when you're considering shipping material. The value of your material really dictates how you're going to be shipping it, right? We want to make sure that the cost of your freight is less than the value of your load. If it's not, if it's an upside down load, then you'll maybe consider further processing or holding off shipping the material until the commodity pricing increases. So now we looked at the material you have on hand, your priorities, the commodities, the volumes, and now you're ready to ship. You're all ready to go. What do we do next? We determine if your material is able to ship direct to market. Next slide, please. So if your material qualifies to ship directly to an end user, it's really because it's meeting certain requirements. Full truckload quantities, usually over 38,000 pounds. If you're able to load a trailer in a timely manner, if you're able to load a trailer safely, if the bales meet specs, so if you have enough baling wire to keep the integrity of the baler. Some of the benefits of shipping direct to an end user is that you're cutting out the middleman. There is no other step between your material being shipped and the material being used as feedstock. Some of the benefits is that you will be getting paid market value for the material. Also, usually the end user orchestrates freight and pays freight or quotes you for the material with the freight already included in the price. So let's say for whatever reason, you cannot ship direct to an end user. You either don't have the volumes, you have an assortment of material that makes it necessary to cross dock it at a partnering MRF. We can arrange for that as well. We also may want to look at upgrading your material, having it further processed at a MRF so that you can get more money for that material when it gets to the end user. Or we can orchestrate your load so we can pick up half of a load of material at your facility. If you're only generating half a load of sorted office paper, but want to ship it in this market, we can send a trailer to you, fill up with as much as you have of that material, and then send it to another customer to fill out the load. So there are options available if you can't ship mill direct. So utilizing the full trailer. What's really important when you're shipping anything, you really have to look at, is this going to be safe to unload when it gets to the receiving end? If it isn't, your load is going to be rejected. So here are some visuals on what is an acceptable load pattern when you're loading trailers. Next slide. If you're shipping a combination load of Gaylords and pallets, you really want to put the heavy material on the bottom row. If you're shipping a combination of bales and Gaylords, you want the Gaylords to be loaded on top of the bales. Make sure that you have the appropriate size pallet for your Gaylords to avoid shipping or falling during transportation. Next slide. I know I keep saying utilize the full extent of the trailer, but you don't want to get carried away and overload the trailer. If you overload the trailer, the freight companies or the trucker may be liable for fines. Also, it could be damaging for existing infrastructure. I don't want to get into the weeds when it comes to exporting containers, but I did want to offer you a visual so that you can see the difference between exporting material and shipping direct in the marketplace domestically. If you notice, the exporting commodities, the containers that we have are smaller. So the value per load, or the estimated load weight rather, is going to be less than what you can fit into a drive domestic van. Next, please. Also, the process and how to load the containers are different. You have to take a series of pictures before you load, during the loading process, and then after. Next slide. If you're loading the container with Gaylords, you need to take pictures not only of that loading process, but also detailed close-up pictures of what's in the Gaylords. Next slide. Another difference between loading an export container and a drive domestic van is that the loading pattern is going to be different. So really familiarizing yourself with what it entails to export material would be really helpful. Also, don't be ashamed to ask for written instructions and go over those instructions before the container arrives. Next slide. So shipping forms. Your material is now on your trailer or container and it's ready to go. Before the material leaves, you need to fill out a bill of lading, and because it is a receipt for the material, but also it's a contract. What it's saying is that the carrier has taken responsibility for your material on the equipment, excuse me. And it's going to transport the material to the listed location on behalf of the consignee. So it really is a contract. We're taking this for you. We're going to deliver it to the receiving location. However, you should know that the shipper is still in ownership of the material until it is received and accepted at that location. So even though it's on the road, it's still your material until it is accepted on the back end. Potential chargebacks. So let's look at some chargebacks that people find themselves confronting when they ship material. Next slide. The most common chargeback we see are the light loads. that you can't make at least 30,000 pounds on a trailer. It's not a problem if we have that discussion before the material is shipped. We can negotiate and say, okay, this is how much you have on hand. This is how much your average load is going to weigh. That's fine. This is what that looks like in numbers, as opposed to shipping it saying, we'll have a full load and then getting a charge back on the back end. Also, truck ordered, not used. That's when you say, hey, we're going to have this order being picked up, the truck gets there, and it's turned away without being loaded. That can be really costly. And lastly, detention. Detention is when you have a trailer show up and you can't get the trailer loaded within the free time. And that allotted free time is usually about 2 hours. It takes about an hour and a half to load material. So if your guys are at lunch, or if you have an inexperienced forklift driver and it's over 2 hours, you may see a chargeback. Tips on avoiding chargebacks really simply is just knowing your material, knowing what's supposed to ship, knowing the grades, and also looking at what the weights per unit of that material is. You'll be able to figure out how many bales to fit on that trailer beforehand. You want to confirm the order. You want to make sure that you know the pickup date, the agreed upon commodity, and the weight per load. You want to utilize an experienced licensed forklift driver to load the trailer. And then again, plan ahead by staging the material either on the dock or near the dock. So here's some terminologies that we use frequently that affects your cost of freight. So FOB. FOB pricing is when you are quoted for the rebates of your commodities, and they say that's the price FOB, freight on board from your customer's dock or from the customer's dock. So that's saying that freight has already been considered in your pricing. Rejection, a rejection is when your material gets to the end user's location or receiving point and the load is not being offloaded. It's rejected. So your material ships away from the facility, still loaded, and it needs to be fixed or corrected before the ownership can be given to the receiving plant. A backhaul simply refers to a trailer that arrives at your location after being offloaded nearby. Most of our pickups are backhauls. They're more efficient that way. If a trailer comes specifically to you, it's really, you're just shipping air at that point. And we call that deadheading, and that's not an effective way to ship. And then lastly, cross-docking. We talked a little bit about that. It's when material comes into a facility, it's sorted, and then reloading on an outgoing trailer. So to recap, before you think about shipping or ordering a load, you want to make sure you have your priorities straight. What is the priority behind shipping the material? You want to build the load, estimate the value of the load. You may not be ready to ship it. You want to confirm the pickup information. You want to stage the load, utilize the totality of the trailer, and create the bill of lading. Thank you guys so much. I am going to pass the mic off to Tim Botso with Bay City.
Hello, thank you, Jill. Hello, all. I'm Tim Botso, the Parks and Environmental Affairs Manager for the City of Bay City. Here in Bay City, we self-collect garbage and recycling weekly curbside. We also offer seasonal yard waste and brush collection services. We service roughly 15,000 homes a week and 1,500 businesses. All those services are funded through our monthly user fees. We also operate city-owned transfer station and recycling drop-off center, which is fee-based. We have been lucky and received additional funding from EGLE through the infrastructure and e-waste grants the last couple of years. We have contracted hauling of our solid waste through a regional trucking company. We currently self-haul recyclables to a waste management facility in Saginaw. We also direct haul our yard waste to a compost facility in Saginaw County. Our overflow material is handled either through the contract or sometimes we self-haul to the landfill itself. Our average monthly refuse collection is roughly 1,200 tons, and we collect about 100 tons a month on curbside recycling. There's our gate sign. Welcome to the Bay City Recycles Drop-Off Center. The Bay City Recycles Drop-Off Center is a new adventure for us. Like everything last year, the grand opening was delayed due to COVID. The reason for us opening the drop-off center was to offer recycling services to those who did not have them readily available to them. Apartment buildings, businesses, outlying townships and counties that don't have a robust recycling system. We offer recycling services just about to anyone, residents, non-residents, out-of-city customers, residential, commercial customers. So you have something, bring it to us. We offer basic single stream recycling, cardboard recycling, appliance, harder to recycle items like appliances and polystyrene, batteries, plastic film, vinyl siding, amongst other items. Our goal is to try to keep recycling close to home and easy. We try to keep things local, partner with Michigan companies and markets. We use a combination, like I mentioned earlier, of trucking methods. We self-haul, contracted trucking services, depends on the day and my staffing levels, how we transport items. It also depends on the cost of the cost. One of the biggest things we found out with transfer station is the bulk materials just take up a lot of room, and trying to keep them inside and in good condition. So we also have other items that require some other attention, like batteries and paint, e-waste, that we don't want to devalue them by putting them outside. Trucking costs, determination if we're going to self-haul versus contract is, am I fully staffed for the day? Do I have the staff I can send? Do we have the equipment to send it today? Is it cheaper to send my staff or have someone pick it up? A lot of times we'll have Midland Recycling come and pick up our polystyrene just because we ran out of room and we don't have time to haul it or wait for it to be picked up. We want enough materials to make it worthwhile to haul. We don't want to hoard nothing, you know. And sometimes I just need the materials gone. So it doesn't matter if I have the manpower or not, you just have to contract it and have it hauled off site. A good example of that would be like a couple weeks ago for our Earth Day event. We wanted our building empty so that we had room to store everything from those the 2-week-long event. Something that I this morning when I was going over everything, I thought of. We try to do everything also in the same fiscal year. We try to match up our revenues and expenses. I don't know why I didn't think of that before, but you know, I mean, I don't want to have a bunch of CRT TVs sitting there and have the expense on next year's budget when the revenue was brought on in this year's. So the transfer station is a new adventure for us. Rewind 4 years ago, and we were self-hauling individual garbage trucks, recycling everything. We were traveling roughly 60 miles per day per truck to the landfill. So we were traveling roughly 400 miles a day, plus or minus, just to the landfill, not including our collection routes. And if anyone knows anything about large trucks, our fuel economy is not that good. Our wear and tear on the trucks, everything. We currently have a hauling contract for compacted loads of garbage. Like I mentioned earlier, our bulk items, depending on the day, if we have capacity at the transfer station, we'll take it. If we're having a hard time, some days we'll have a hard time with the loads packing correctly, we'll haul it directly to the landfill just to save capacity on the trailers. Some considerations versus self-hauling and contracted is equipment and infrastructure costs. Obviously you need a facility, a compactor, trucks, transfer trailers, a yard truck possibly, loaders, backhoes, fork trucks. All that's not cheap. Besides the infrastructure and equipment, finding a good, reliable contractor. They have fixed costs, we have fixed costs, variable costs. You know, I mean, we just want to make sure this is a win-win situation for everyone involved. We've had issues with truck breakdowns. I'll talk about it here in a minute. In our contract, we have some language where if the truck breaks down, they provide us a switcher truck on our yard. if the truck breaks down, they have 4 hours to have a mechanic there and it running, or they have to swap it out with another vehicle so that we can continue our operations. That's something that we built into our contract. A big thing in this industry, I think you have to be flexible. We have trucks. My truck is nowhere near Steve's. You know, we have about 20 trucks in my sanitation fleet here, but it's not uncommon to have 5 of those trucks down with some sort of emissions issues at any given day. So being flexible and adjusting on the fly, we have to do that constantly. With our transfer station and the recycling center, we have capacity and room for expansion and room for growth in our program. A big thing about outsourcing or contracting out of the compacted garbage is trying to find a good partnership that lasts and is adjustable. Hey, Karen, if you can slide forward. We placed an RFP out about 5 years ago for solid waste hauling. We got 3 responses to the RFP. We partnered with a rather large regional trucking company, DHT Trucking out of Reese. We did a 5-year contract. We got 1 more year left on that contract right now. In that contract, they provide us, like I mentioned, a switcher truck. They provide us maintenance on the yard vehicles. They do all the maintenance on the trailers. The transfer trailers themselves were purchased by DHT, which was a very hefty investment by them. Tells me that they're a long-term partner. And since we did that contract, I've also contracted with them for hauling seasonal yard waste in November when we could not get yard waste picked up off the ground. We contract with them. We are dumping in one of our parking lots and hauling it out by 100 yards at a time versus our 30. We also use them every spring now to haul all our wood chips for my parks that I'm over. It's just been a very great partnership, and it's beginning to just grow even more. How do we get the most for our compacted load? This took us a little while to figure out. DHT had a safety net built into their contract to make sure that to cover their fixed costs. So that trailer was costing us $744 to go to the landfill from our site. It didn't matter if it was empty, had a pound on it, or 10,000 pounds. You know what I mean? At first, we were struggling to get 19 tons on the trailer. We had our friends from Speed Tech come up a few times, made some adjustments to the compactor, found the sweet spot, and you know, if we send out a truck under 40 tons today, I question why, because we're making good loads now. This everything I just kind of discussed, how do we manage such a multifaceted program? You know, we pick up every item curbside, we haul stuff out, we contract with different companies to haul, you know, batteries out or hauled by one trucking company or a processor. You know, it's really a lot of juggling day to day, just trying to keep everything moving and making sure we have things off the property. Our goal is to keep, our goal in opening the transfer station was to keep our costs down. We want to provide the best, cheapest services to our residents that we can. As recycling rates were going up, we've been looking at alternatives to how do we lower those? And the transfer station to us made sense. We're not hauling recyclables out of there yet, but that will probably happen in the next few years. As a municipality, our goal is to not make money. You know, the break even would be a net zero budget is what we try to run. Maximizing our efficiency. This is where we were talking earlier about, do we have a load picked up or do I have one of my guys haul a load somewhere? Managing and balancing services, programs, you know, we've saved, by opening the transfer station, we've saved thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in fuel costs, tires, wear and tear on our equipment. Landfills are not gentle on our trucks at all. If we go back a few seconds ago, I was talking about balancing the trailers. One thing that we found out with opening the transfer station is that we've had some emission issues with our large collection trucks. So some days we might send our trucks to, if we have time, to the landfill just to get them out on the highway, let them burn off the emissions, let them regen. And this was a little thing that we didn't think of when we first opened the transfer station, but it's one of those things, being flexible and trying to figure out how to move forward. So future considerations. South Hall, do we invest in equipment, additional staff? You know, as our site grows, we will need more staff over there to manage it and to operate it. We're looking to establish a new compost facility or utilize the transfer station for hauling out yard waste. We're looking to implement cart-based recycling for our curbside collection residential. We're looking to expand and utilize the transfer station to haul single stream recycling out by a larger load. And we've been researching and looking into a potential food waste diversion program here. Our ultimate goal with our transfer station is to be a regional hub for recyclable materials. We're looking to bulk our materials and benefit from economies of scale. And this will help make recycling more affordable for our residents. And hopefully we're looking to make recycling more affordable for the whole Great Lakes Bay region. So with that, back to you, Karen.
Excellent presentations. And Tim, I owe you an apology for calling you out for some background noise that wasn't your problem. So my apologies to you, but
I'm
really
fine
good
with that.
presentation. Being my bad guy, I appreciate that. So really great presentations, and I think very helpful information. And what we really tried to do with this session is give a private sector service provider, a manufacturer, a broker, and a city, you know, who all have different, you know, perspectives and different ways of handling material, a chance to tell you, you know, about when and how to use them or employ their services. And I guess I'll ask you first, Jill, you know, when would someone use a broker such as yourself, rather than, you know, going direct to a service provider that can either handle that directly or get that directly to a manufacturer?
So we work with multiple commodities. It would behoove someone to work with Metro because we can move the plastics, we can move the fibers, but also because like I said, we really work to move your materials, and we're not getting paid unless we're able to find homes for them. And again, the ongoing education as things change in the marketplace, the ever-changing recycling markets, that you may have to change the way you process your material to find a home for it. So not only that, the advantages to work with Metro would be just to keep that material moving the best way, and you're always going to have that support.
And it sounds as well with your discussion about, you know, how to manage maybe multiple materials on one load, that is something that you can help with as well. And which may be particularly helpful in a rural situation or when you're not producing, you know, full truckloads of material.
Right. And the goal always is, how do we get this material to the marketplace, right? And if you have to take a step in between the material from the generator to the marketplace, it's really because there are a lot of different commodities that are being generated, or there isn't a lot of volume there. So we like to utilize our customer base and kind of network people together so that we can create a load to go to market.
That's great. And I would expect Carrie or Justin that, you know, Padnos can do some of the same kinds of, provide some of the same kinds of services, given the fact that you know, manage multiple materials. But that's going to you for processing before it goes to an end user?
Yeah, I can take that, Karen. So Correct. It could be in two different cases. So if it were something that were loose, like in a Gaylord box, it would have to be baled or maybe processed somehow in our metals facility. So at our Wyoming facility, outside of Grand Rapids, we actually process paper, plastic, and metal there. So we can take all three of those materials on one truck into our facility. Now, some of that could be baled, or it just needs to be simply cross-docked and then goes to an end user or mill. Some of it could be things like we saw the wire, which would need to be chopped, or loose, paper that would need to be baled. But yeah, you could put more than one commodity on the same truck coming to the same facility where it could be processed.
That's great. And Steve, if I understand it right, Pratt, while you guys are, producing cardboard and out of mixed paper, you guys also take more materials than just mixed paper. You provide service beyond that. Is that still the case?
Yes, that's correct. So in the Pratt model, we have two recycling plants adjacent to our Wapakoneta mill and to our Valparaiso paper mill, where we're able to take mixed commodities in. We tend to deal direct with generators. So, we call it mill direct opportunities, but if you have commodities that are unable to go straight to the paper mill, we're able to divert those loads to our recycling plants, where we break down stretch film, plastic, foam, carpet, whatever we can offer to the customer that makes sense to recover, and really to understand the goal of the generator. So
that's great, helpful. I guess I would ask too, what are like the top 3 things that you'd like to share with anybody who wants to engage in your services? What are the top 3 things you would want someone to know before working with you?
With Pratt?
Sure, we'll start with Pratt.
Well, I think it's really to have a good understanding. I think the partners that made presentations made some really good point, is to understand the commodity that you're generating. At the end of the day, to get the maximum rebate for your material is to ship it mill direct to an end user. Anytime you have to divert it to a secondary, maybe a facility has to be sorted or has to be baled, there's cost incurred with that. There's nothing wrong with it, because a lot of companies they don't have the capabilities, they don't have the equipment, they're not able to ship mill direct. So you have to partner either way. But our goal when we go into a facility is to try to work directly with that customer, so we can give them the maximum rebate for the material. I like to use the word, we coach them up how to generate full truckload quantities, understand the commodities that they're generating, understand the value that they have, understand how the markets work. So, once you jump into the recycling business, it's not a short-term, it's really a long-term solution that we're looking to provide.
That's great. Carrie or Justin, do you have like a top 3 pieces of advice?
I think I'll take this one, and Justin might want to add one, but sustainability in general. So Padnos has really done a deep dive into our own carbon footprint and understanding the scope 1, 2, and 3 environmental carbon footprinting. So when I go into a customer, I'm able to directly tie what they're doing with their materials to that carbon footprint and help them calculate the difference in one freight model versus another. We just have a lot of different options to help them reduce that print in the closed loop and circular programs that we do, where we can take their materials and put it right back into a product. It's very similar to what Pratt does. I mean, if you're a buyer of boxes, Pratt offers a great service. It's complete closed loop. It's awesome. We just do that with a wider variety of materials, right? So I think the most important thing for the customer is to understand what you have and what the best scenario is for you, and each of us provides a great service if it meets the needs of the customer.
Yeah, I just want to add it. I don't know if we touched on the drop trailer service, but Steve mentioned mill direct, and same with Jill. Obviously that's the best solution when you can do that. One of the restraints from doing that is just space limitations, right? So we have a lot of customers that just can't store a full truckload of whether it be bales of cardboard or gaylords of plastic. So, I know Carrie touched on the equipment, but, we do have the ability to spot trailers at customers where they can it's basically used as a storage space, right, for them, so they can get off their floor, which could create safety issues, housekeeping issues. It's also not a great idea to store a whole load of material outside just because of weather, especially in the winter here in Michigan. So spotted trailers are definitely something that can help a customer go mill direct that maybe doesn't have the space or the capability to store a full load.
That brings up another question for me, and that is, when additional equipment is required by a company who wants to, recycle more, the burden of that cost, is that on the company or is it shared with, a processor or collector? Or, I know that Pratt and Padnos often provide those drop trailers, but how is that equipment covered? Those equipment needs covered. Justin, why don't you, if you can take that?
So all of the above, right? So it's all negotiable. A lot of it's dependent on volume, right? So if you have a drop trailer that's switching once a day or even maybe once a week, one thing I will say, in my experience over the last 5 years, as logistics became tighter and drivers became tighter and equipment became tighter, mills and Padnos even as well, is less willing to drop a trailer for free for a load a week or a load a month, when maybe that was commonplace. Now, a lot of carriers, whether it be third party or us or a mill, are expecting those trailers to flip over more often or get switched more often and get them on the road where they're making money. So that is one big change we've seen in the industry, I would say, over the last 5 years is you really do have to avoid those rental fees. So, a lot of companies will charge a rental. It's usually per month, which is negotiable to have that service. But to some companies, it's totally worth it. Like I said, a small rental fee monthly, creates an opportunity for them to get stuff off their floor or not have it outside, which can create safety and housekeeping issues. So, and then as far as equipment, balers, I know Pratt occasionally will, help place balers in places. Same with Metro. Sometimes you can use the rebates to work, the cost of those balers off, or like a leasing program. And a lot of those depend on markets, right? When markets are down, the return on investment for those balers or any other kind of equipment, it takes a lot longer. So when markets are higher, there's more opportunity to have equipment placed when the return on investments, can be captured a little quicker.
Excellent. Jill, from your perspective, what are your top 3 pieces of advice for anybody who would want to work with a broker?
Well, my advice to you, if you want to get into the recycling industry and work with a broker, is to really feel comfortable with who you're working with. You build a rapport. It's not just moving your materials, it's understanding what the priorities are. So I have customers that don't want to think about their scrap at all. They don't want to know about it. They just want it gone. Then I have customers that are really thoughtful and really want to analyze what it is they have and how they can maximize the value of those commodities. So really, it's building that relationship to understand each other's priorities, and then really trusting that you are in the right hands to move this material. So I think that would be my top 2. And then lastly, knowing that things change and this is fluid. So when you start, it may not look the same a year down the line, depending on your capabilities and the investments or just the recycling markets. So.
Excellent. That's great. And Tim, if you want to come back to us, I'm wondering, if you have any advice and working with a contracted, hauling service, what's your advice about engaging with them?
Karen, as you know me pretty well, I'm about relationships and building partnerships. And we work with 2 trucking companies here a lot. And it's just building those rapports, getting the best value for our dollar, and trying to make long-term partnerships. That's my advice.
Simple. Thank you, Tim. That's great. We do have a question in the chat. Looking ahead, where do you see trucking fees in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? Let's start there. Justin, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, Carrie can comment probably more on the electric side, but I will say, fuel obviously plays a large, part in the cost of trucking, right? I mean, we're seeing fuel prices rise here in the last few months. That does get passed on to the customers, right? You might see things like autonomous vehicles in the next 10 years. I mean, that could change, the way trucking is used today. I mean, that obviously solves our driver shortage, which is a big obstacle now, and we don't see changing at all. I think that's going to be an obstacle the next 2 to 5 years as well. But, Carrie might be able to add something on what Panos is talking about as far as electric vehicles or alternative fuels.
That's great. Before we get, well, go ahead, Carrie, you're ready to go with that one. Go ahead.
So I am bound and determined to get electric vehicles.
Excellent.
The feasibility of it isn't exactly, there's some pretty big hurdles, we'll just say, that you have to get charging stations, and you're looking for one electric truck to haul a van trailer. You're looking at over $600,000 investment. So there's some pretty big barriers, but I fully believe that it's worth it. And we're working on figuring that out.
Do you think that, the autonomous and the electric are going to end up coming around the same time, or do you think there's still going to be a big delay?
I think electric will come first.
Okay.
There's just a lot of infrastructure that has to be built in terms of being able to have an autonomous vehicle. And then you get, the trucks can go a lot farther than the technology is ready for, if that makes sense. So
Yes.
you have to have your city set. Everything is there to be able to do autonomous vehicles, but there's just a lot of expense for a city itself and infrastructure to be able to make that work, where the electric trucks are, you're going to start really seeing those be populated next year.
So speaking of those electric trucks, then, it seems to me that there's still a requirement for infrastructure to charge them, especially if you're hauling over long distances. And so it begs the question of, maintaining kind of that, hub spoke distance. Speak to that a little bit, if you could. Like, what is the distance that you want to truck something? And is there, some calculations that you do to manage that, or to transfer loads, or what does that look like?
I would say in a year, you can re-ask me that question and I'll be able to answer a lot better than I can today. Where I'm building my models on is all 100-mile radius to our plant. So looking very specifically at the customers that have the highest goals for carbon footprint, because they're the ones that are the most interested in having their materials serviced by an electric vehicle.
Interesting. Does anybody else have anything to add about kind of that topic? How far we want to move this material?
I'll chime in a little bit, Karen. With the Pratt model, it's putting enough next paper mill in or the next recycling plant in, which makes it feasible for logistics. You don't want to be too remote. You don't want to be too far away from where generators are, so you can backhaul that material in a cost-effective manner.
Yeah, that's I think a really good point. Jill, do you want to add to that?
Honestly, where we ship material from a generator, it really depends on the market and where the end user is. So if I present our customers with options saying we can, based on your priorities, we can keep it close in Michigan if that's a priority, or if you're looking at rebates, we can export it if we need to get a higher value for that material, or it may be going out of state. So it really depends on what the priorities are of the customer, what their goals are. That dictates how far we have to ship it, or if we ship it far at all, if we keep it in the state.
Yeah. So do you think that there's any particular advantages or disadvantages to being in Michigan, surrounded by water, in movement of these materials? Anybody want to chime in there?
Well, I can chime in on one disadvantage, especially in the export, and Jill could probably shed some more light on this, but it's really what we call drayage, right? So we're not near a major seaport, right? So basically, if you're exporting something, it has to go to the East Coast or West Coast, and typically that's done so by rail. So that can either go to the Detroit rail yard or the Chicago rail yard. So depending on where you are in Michigan, it probably ends up at one of those two places before it makes its way to a port, which then goes on an overseas container. But that is a challenge of being in the Midwest is export, drayage and shipping costs can be a little more costly than obviously being on one of the coasts.
How much shipping happens in the Great Lakes themselves of these materials?
Well, you
Any
saw
idea?
the barge, right? So we,
Yeah.
a barge that goes, a lot of those go to steel mills, usually in northern Indiana, kind of around the southern tip of Lake Michigan there.
Mhm.
So that is one advantage we do have being in Holland there is we are able to load barges. So we do take advantage of that. Yeah.
Awesome. Anybody else have anything to add to to, to advantages, opportunities for being or disadvantages to being in Michigan? And we get another question here. Good job, Rosemary. Do any of the panelists foresee an impact to logistics, transportations, or vehicles if federal infrastructure bill is passed by Congress? Like, that's a good one because I think cities and states are seeing, COVID money from the federal government, and there's a big infrastructure bill kind of hopefully in the making. What do you see the benefits being to the work that we do here? Better roads, investment in, electric infrastructure, or in those kind of multimodal opportunities for driverless vehicles? Anything, any speculation there?
I don't. To be honest with you, I don't know how that's going to translate to how to move recyclables around the country or internationally. But I'm hopeful that part of when we talk about infrastructure could not just be the roads and bridges, but also the infrastructure around recycling, right? So if they're using a broader, it's a broader scope, is my understanding of what they're looking at. And I do think that we should be looking at the infrastructure and the way and means we move around the country as far as the recycling goes.
Yeah, can you guys say anything about, when I think about trying to grow markets right here in Michigan, it seems to me that we would benefit by lessening the costs of logistics. Does that make sense across the board? I kind of heard you, Jill, say that, sometimes you can get more money for the value of your material outside of Michigan, but the cost of logistics then may negate that. So
what's interesting is when you're shipping material and you get a better price farther away, it's because, I like the China example, it's because they're utilizing the backhaul. So China brings in more goods to America than Americans could use and discard, right? So they have the readily available export containers that are looking to be filled before they go back to China, right? So it's cheaper to ship something to China than it is to send something from Chicago to LA. So when we talk about how to lower the cost, it's really utilizing what's in the area. I noticed that Meijer is one of the sponsors, and I love working with Meijers because they have their freight company that, as they're traveling around the Midwest in their different stores, they also pick up recycling for us because the truck is in their area. So it's if you think about it that way, it's really utilizing who do we have here? How can we use that backhaul to for the purposes of recycling, to bring the material to market?
excellent points. Very, very good. Do you see any particular remedies to the driver shortage out there right now? I heard, many of you talk about, you're trying to treat them nice, you're nice, clean bathrooms, you're trying to get them home at night. Is that how we get more drivers? What do you see on the horizon?
I'll jump in there, Karen. I think, Pratt runs all brand new equipment, and, you've got to create an incentive for those drivers to, want to show up every day, and you've got to pay them, compensate them fairly, give them good healthcare, good retirement packages. I think that's the road you have to go on to retain drivers. Some drivers might want to do overnight stays, but a lot of drivers want to be home at night so they can be with their family. So it is a challenge.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Go ahead.
Carrie, and then Jill go next. Yeah.
One of the things that Patnos has been actively doing for a number of years now is allowing internal candidates to be trained in their CDL. We pay for all of that training, and then also pay some pretty hefty fees to people that are able to recruit drivers. So for a while there, we had an open challenge that we even extended to the public, that if they could get us a driver, we'd give them $1,000. So
wow.
yeah, I mean, we're just trying to be creative, and
Yeah.
and I hope to expand that. We've talked a lot to Goodwill, you know, if we could expand driver's training to the same participants we've done the recycling training, that really gives those people an opportunity that means they'll have viable employment for a long time.
So it's not, driver training is not a part of the current Goodwill partnership, but could be a future part of the partnership.
It certainly
Okay.
could be, especially if they are successful in getting some more grants.
That's great. Yes, yes. Well, there's money available. So Jill.
I was going to comment about Rosemary's question about how the infrastructure bill would impact. And I think if we invest more in infrastructure and make it easier to move materials around the country, it may be a better option for people to be drivers. That may be enticing if it's less frustrating to be on the road, right?
Yeah. Excellent point. Does anybody else have anything to add? We don't really have more questions coming in. Maybe I'll give the speakers each one a chance to say one last thing they'd like the audience to know before I start closing down the session here. Steve, is there anything you'd like the audience to know about what you do and what Pratt is doing?
I just think, you know, I appreciate the support of the MRC. I think this is a great conversation to have. You know, freight is probably one of the #1 topics to discuss when you're looking to manage commodities. How do you get that material picked up efficiently and getting a fair rebate for your material? We discussed a lot, I think, with the other speakers, you know, quality, packaging, and all that kind of stuff. But you know, at the end of the day, it's you know, freight's going to be there. I don't think it's going to go down. It's going to continue to go up. So there's challenges for everybody. And I think through partnerships, you know, creating full truckload quantities for material is the way to go, or best bang for the buck.
Excellent. Tim, what do you got any last things you'd like the audience to know about how you manage your freighting?
Yeah, we're just, we're always looking to see what's out there. We're looking at new technologies and trying to figure out what the wave of the future is, you know. The last conversation about driver shortage, we feel that close to home every day. I think I'm 4 drivers short. So
Wow.
we've been, you know, it's just trying to overcome the small hurdles every day, and how do we move forward. And some of these new trucks, switching to curbside recycling will help us with our driver shortage, because we'll need less throwers. So it'll somewhat help.
Excellent. And really glad, Tim, that Bay City is thinking about being a hub for the region and really trying to maximize and consolidation of material that way. I think that's going to be a help to Michigan. How about Carrie or Justin, or both of you, one of you to start? Something you'd want us to know about what you do, Justin?
Well, you know, thanks for having us, first of all. And, you know, this is a great session. Thanks to MRC and the fellow speakers. All did a great job. You know, the title is Cost of Logistics, right? And, you know, there are a lot of headwinds right now in logistics, driver shortage being a big one. You know, how do we get new drivers? You know, we might have to pay them more. And again, that's trickle down economics, right? I mean, if we have to pay drivers more, then it's probably going to cost more to haul things. So, you know, one advantage we do have in Michigan, and especially Padnos being based in West Michigan, is there are a lot of paper mills in Michigan. So that is to our advantage logistically, especially in the corrugated side. And in the Midwest, you know, it's a big paper making region. So we do take advantage of those shipping lanes. You know, Jill mentioned backhauls. We were a huge advocate of backhauls. And thanks for having us.
That's great. Carrie.
Hi, we've covered a lot of good ground today. I would say it's supply and demand, right? So as much as I am a proponent of having more capacity in Michigan to do more things so that we are able to recycle more diverse materials, we do have to be careful about upsetting the markets. And there's, you know, we want some healthy competition out there. But if there's too much capacity to process materials, then the materials won't have a value anymore. So it's building that infrastructure in a way that's balanced and allows companies to still be able to participate in the program.
Excellent. I've heard that before from other people, so it's a good point. Jill, bring us home.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun. I learned a lot. I think really what my advice is leaving would be just saying, hey, know your material, know your value per load, because that is going to dictate how you ship the material. I think that's the most important point. Just know the value per load.
Excellent. Thank you all. Really appreciate your presentations today. Really helpful, good stuff. I learned a lot of pieces put together for me. And I would encourage the audience to reach out to any one of you to learn more or to engage with you about, how they can use your services. I think it's great. I will once again, thank our sponsors. Without them, we're not quite nowhere, but, you've really helped us build, what we've come to be in our advocacy for recycling. We do have a couple of polls. We always want to understand from you, like if you enjoyed the session, if it was informative for you. So Kelly, would you put up the first of the two polls? We'll take about 20 or 30 seconds to get everybody's feedback on these polls, or the first poll here. Got a few more seconds. Please do weigh in. All right, great. Okay, Kelly, how about the second poll? You may have to expand your poll to see all the choices. This is all very helpful information for us as we prepare for, the next educational opportunities. We are hoping to have an in-person short form conference in October 28 and 29 in Bay City. So we will start to plan and prepare for that really soon, and we hope you can join us there. Kelly, you can end this polling, and I'll say, remind you all that we have, oh goodness, we've done all of these sessions. We have 3 more sessions next week, and that is the end of our conference. We have the Eagle updates on Monday. So everything that Eagle's doing, and maybe an opportunity to provide them with some feedback and input about what you'd like to see. We have a keynote on Wednesday that is Circularity Isn't Charity, it's Operational Strategy. And this is all really about the supply chain and how recycling fits into that world. It's going to be a valuable keynote, as well as our annual conference and reporting happening that day, so a little bit longer session. And then we've got the paradox of plastic. We've got 2 speakers. One of those speakers is from the International Monetary Fund, talking about the paradox of plastic, what carbon credits really mean, and how we really should think about our future. Thank you again to our presenters. Thank you all for joining us for the conversation today. Really appreciate it, and hope we see you next week. Have a great weekend.